America has 95,471 miles of coastline. You've heard of maybe 12 beach towns: Malibu, Miami Beach, the Hamptons, Outer Banks if you watch the show. Meanwhile, there are dozens of coastal towns where you can still buy a house for under $400,000, walk to the beach without fighting for parking, and actually hear the waves over the sound of influencers filming content. This isn't about those beach towns. This is about the 8 you've never heard of. The ones that don't show up on best beaches listicles. The places where locals want to keep it that way. Some are on coastlines you didn't know existed. Others are hiding in plain sight on maps you've looked at 100 times. One of them is literally the easternmost point in the entire United States, and you've probably never even seen a photo of it. We're talking Victorian seaports that time forgot, Gulf Coast islands. Texans keep secret, Pacific Northwest towns where the beach is made of driftwood logs the size of school buses, and one Florida panhandle fishing village where the oysters are famous, but the town isn't. These aren't luxury destinations. They're working waterfronts, artist colonies, storm watching outposts, and places where your biggest decision is whether to kayak before or after the farmer's market. The median home price in these 8 towns averages $340,000. That's less than a 1-bedroom condo in San Diego, less than a parking space in Boston. For that, you get actual houses, ocean access, and communities that haven't been Airbnb'd into oblivion yet. So if you're tired of being priced out of every coastal zip code worth living in, or if you just want to know where the beach towns are before everyone else finds them, you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you're ready to discover America's secret coast. Subscribe if you want more hidden gems, and drop a comment telling me which coast you'd choose: Gulf, Atlantic, or Pacific. Let's start in Texas. Number 8, Port Aransas, Texas, the Gulf secret. Everyone knows South Padre Island, Spring Break Central, condo towers, the whole tourism industrial complex. But drive 3 hours up the Texas coast and you hit Mustang Island, where Port Aransas sits like South Padre's older sibling who got a job and calmed down. Port Aransas, or Port A if you want to sound like you belong, is an 18-mile barrier island town with a population that hovers around 3,800 people. Most Americans have never heard of it. Most Texans refuse to shut up about it. There's a reason for that. Here's what the data shows. According to Zillow, the median home price in Port Aransas is $438,000 as of late 2024. That's not cheap by Texas standards, but compare it to any California beach town and it's basically free. Redfin confirms homes are sitting on the market for an average of 42 days, which means sellers are motivated and buyers have leverage. The cost of living index sits at 108, just 8% above the national average. Meanwhile, in Malibu, that number is 241. But here's the thing about Port A. It's not trying to be fancy. This is a fishing village that happens to have tourists, not a tourist trap that happens to have fish. The downtown consists of a few blocks of surf shops, seafood joints, and bars where the dress code is shoes optional if you're not driving. The beach is wide, the sand is decent, and the Gulf water is warm enough that you don't need a wetsuit to swim in May. Port Aransas has one grocery store, a handful of restaurants that aren't chains, and exactly zero pretension. The drivers here treat stop signs like friendly suggestions, and I watched someone make a U-turn in the middle of the main drag to grab tacos they just passed. Nobody honked. That's the pace. Picture this: early morning, walking the beach before the sun gets punishing, pelicans diving into the surf, the smell of salt and sunscreen, and the realization that your biggest stress is whether to fish off the jetty or the pier. Your mortgage is less than what your friends in Austin pay to park near their condo. But here's the reality check. Hurricane risk is not theoretical here. Hurricane Harvey hit in 2017 and essentially deleted parts of the island. The town rebuilt, but anyone buying property here needs to understand that flood insurance isn't optional, it's existential. According to NOAA data, Port Aransas sits directly in a hurricane zone that sees major storm activity every 7 to 10 years on average. You're not avoiding this. You're accepting it as rent for living on the Gulf. The other reality is heat. Summer in Port Aransas means 95 degrees plus temperatures with humidity that makes your lungs feel like they're breathing soup. The AC bill becomes a second mortgage payment. Locals will tell you the real season runs from October through April, and they're not wrong. The summer months are when you either leave or accept that your life now revolves around proximity to air conditioning. But if you can handle hurricanes and heat, here's what you get: beach access without traffic jams. Fishing from piers, where locals will actually help you instead of glaring at you. A ferry ride to the mainland that's free and kind of charming if you don't have anywhere urgent to be. And a community that's small enough that the guy who sells you bait might also be the mayor. A local realtor told us off the record, people move here because they're done performing. You can't fake it when everyone knows you forgot to tie your boat down during the last storm. At least in Port Aransas, the Gulf water is warm enough to swim without gear. Our next stop has a Pacific Ocean so cold it's basically a full-body ice bath, and somehow that's considered a selling point. Number 7. Ocean Shores, Washington, the Pacific Northwest escape. From the Gulf Coast to the edge of the Olympic Peninsula, where Ocean Shores sits on a 6-mile-long spit of land jutting into the Pacific like Washington decided to build a beach town and then forgot to advertise it. Ocean Shores is what happens when you take a 1960s planned beach resort, strip away the resort part, and leave behind a grid of streets, a handful of motels, and a whole lot of driftwood. Population is around 6,700 year-round, which swells in summer but never reaches South Padre levels of chaos. Most people have never heard of it. Most Washingtonians have been here once, decided the weather was too hostile, and never came back. Here's the economic reality. Zillow data shows median home prices in Ocean Shores at $371,000 as of late 2024. That's shockingly affordable for Washington Coast property, especially compared to anything near Seattle where starter homes are pushing $700,000. Homes sit on the market for an average of 68 days according to Redfin, which tells you this isn't a hot market, it's a think carefully about this market. The cost of living index is 103, just barely above national average, which is almost unheard of for coastal Washington. But before you start Zillow stalking Ocean Shores listings, let's talk about what you're actually buying into. The Pacific Northwest coast is not California. The water is cold enough to stop your heart if you're not wearing a wetsuit. The weather is gray approximately 280 days a year. Summer exists as a concept for about 6 weeks in July and August, and even then, you'll need a jacket most evenings. This is storm watching country. Winter storms roll in off the Pacific with waves that hit 20 plus feet, winds that knock out power for days, and rain that comes in sideways. According to NOAA climate data, Ocean Shores averages 80 inches of rain per year. That's not a typo. Your rain boots will get more use than your beach towel. The town itself feels like it's stuck in 1985, which is either charming or depressing depending on your tolerance for vintage motels and restaurants with names like the Galway Bay Irish Pub in a town with approximately 0 Irish people. There's a grocery store, a few antique shops, and a casino if you're into that. The nearest real city is Aberdeen, 20 miles away, which is not exactly a cultural mecca, but here's what Ocean Shores has that most beach towns don't. Actual space. The beach is massive, wide enough that even on busy summer weekends you can find a stretch of sand with nobody on it. Driftwood logs the size of semi-trucks line the shore, bleached white by salt and sun, creating a landscape that looks more like a Tim Burton film set than a beach resort. You can drive on parts of the beach, which is either convenient or sacrilege depending on your environmental politics. The community is a mix of retirees who wanted cheap coastal living and don't mind the weather, younger families priced out of Seattle who are willing to commute or work remotely, and a surprising number of artists who find the gray skies inspiring instead of oppressive. One local put it perfectly. Ocean Shores has 2 seasons, fog and slightly less fog. You don't move here for the sun. You move here because your soul needs to calm down. Wildlife is everywhere. Bald eagles are common enough that locals stop noticing them. Razor clam digs happen during extreme low tides and turn into community events where hundreds of people show up with shovels and buckets. Gray whales migrate past the coast twice a year. If you're into nature and don't need nature to be warm and sunny, this place delivers. Picture this. January morning, storm clouds rolling in dark and low, wind whipping sand across the beach, the smell of salt and rain, and you're walking with a coffee and a thermos because the one good coffee shop doesn't open until 9 a.m. You're wearing 3 layers and you're still cold, but there's something about the wildness of it that feels more real than any California beach you've ever visited. Ocean Shores is on the ocean, but feels like the edge of nowhere. Our next stop isn't even on the ocean, it's on a bay, and that technicality is exactly why it works. Number 6. Cape Charles, Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay alternative. Cross the country to Virginia's eastern shore, where Cape Charles sits at the southern tip of the Delmarva Peninsula like a Victorian postcard someone forgot to update. Cape Charles exists because of a railroad and survives because of a bridge tunnel. When the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel opened in 1964, it bypassed Cape Charles entirely, which should have killed the town. Instead, it preserved it. While Virginia Beach became a tourism industrial complex 25 miles across the bay, Cape Charles stayed small, stayed quiet, and stayed cheap enough that people are starting to notice. The data tells an interesting story. According to Zillow, median home prices in Cape Charles sit at $425,000 as of late 2024. That's significantly less than Virginia Beach at $340,000 for a condo, let alone an actual house. Redfin shows homes moving relatively quickly at 51 days on market, which indicates steady demand without the feeding frenzy. The town's population is around 1,000 full-time residents, though that swells in summer when DC and Richmond residents show up for weekends. Here's the thing about Cape Charles. It's not on the ocean, it's on the Chesapeake Bay, which means the water is calmer, warmer, and murkier than Atlantic beach towns. The beach is man-made, part of a harbor revitalization project from the 2000s. If you're expecting Outer Banks waves and white sand, you'll be disappointed. If you're expecting calm bay water, you can actually swim in without a wetsuit and a beach where your kids won't get pulled out by riptides, you'll be delighted. The town itself is almost aggressively charming. Victorian homes line streets named after states. Because the railroad company that founded Cape Charles in 1884 had no imagination but plenty of ambition. Many of these homes have been restored by weekenders from DC and retirees from the Northeast who wanted coastal living without coastal prices. The downtown consists of a few blocks of shops, restaurants that are good enough to surprise you, and a brewery because every small town discovered in the last decade is legally required to have a brewery. But let's talk about what you're giving up. Cape Charles is remote in a way that doesn't feel remote until you need something. The nearest Target is 50 miles away across the Bay Bridge Tunnel, which costs $14 each way in tolls. The nearest hospital with a real emergency room is in Nassawadox, 30 minutes north, and if you need specialized care, you're driving to Norfolk. According to the Eastern Shore Health District, the area has a critical shortage of primary care physicians, with a ratio of 1 doctor per 2,100 residents compared to the state average of 1 per 1,200. The economy is agricultural and tourism based, which means seasonal work and not a lot of year-round employment diversity. If you're planning to work locally, options include hospitality, fishing, agriculture, or opening your own business. Remote work is essential unless you're retired or independently wealthy. Internet speeds have improved with recent fiber rollouts, but power outages during storms are common enough that a generator isn't a luxury, it's infrastructure. Weather is milder than ocean shores, but more volatile than Port Aransas. Hurricanes are a real risk. Cape Charles sits on a peninsula jutting into the Chesapeake Bay, which means storm surge can come from multiple directions. Hurricane Isabel in 2003 put parts of the town underwater. Nor'easters in winter bring flooding, wind, and occasionally snow that shuts down the entire peninsula because there's one road in and one road out. And if you thought Ocean Shores was remote, at least it had the Pacific Ocean to justify it. Cape Charles is on a bay and still manages to be 2 hours from anywhere you've heard of. That takes commitment. But here's what works about Cape Charles. It's a real town with a real history that isn't trying to be anything other than what it is. The farmers market on Saturdays is actual farmers selling actual produce they grew. The sunsets over the bay are legitimately spectacular. The pace of life is slow enough that people wave at each other from cars, and it's not performative, it's just what you do. A realtor who's lived here for 15 years told us, Cape Charles is for people who are done with the beach scene and want the beach life. There's a difference. One is about being seen, the other is about being still. Picture this. Summer evening, sitting on the town beach watching the sun set over the Chesapeake Bay, sailboats drifting past, the smell of someone's barbecue mixing with salt air, kids playing in calm water shallow enough to wade out 50 feet. Your mortgage is less than what your cousin pays for a 2-bedroom in Arlington, and you haven't sat in traffic in 6 months. Cape Charles got bypassed by a bridge and became a time capsule. Port Townsend got bypassed by an entire railroad, froze in 1890, and turned that abandonment into an art form. Number 5. Port Townsend, Washington, the Victorian seaport, back to the Pacific Northwest, where Port Townsend sits at the northeastern tip of the Olympic Peninsula like a Victorian-era seaport that refuses to acknowledge the 21st century arrived. Port Townsend was supposed to be a major West Coast city. In the 1880s, it was booming with lumber, shipping, and railroad ambitions. Investors built Victorian mansions and commercial buildings expecting explosive growth. Then the railroad chose Seattle instead. The boom collapsed, and Port Townsend froze in time like a maritime museum where people still live in the exhibits. Today, that frozen in time quality is exactly the draw. The population is around 10,000, with a demographic split between retirees, artists, boat builders, and younger remote workers who wanted Pacific Northwest beauty without Seattle prices. According to Zillow, the median home price in Port Townsend is $565,000 as of late 2024. That's not cheap by national standards, but compared to Seattle, where median home prices top $800,000, it starts to look reasonable. Redfin data shows homes sitting on the market for an average of 73 days, indicating a slower market where buyers have time to think. The cost of living index is 118, higher than our previous towns, but still well below major West Coast cities. The kicker is property taxes and maintenance costs on older homes. Many of the Victorian houses that make Port Townsend charming are also expensive to maintain, with outdated systems, historical preservation requirements if they're landmarked, and heating bills that will make you question your life choices when winter hits. Speaking of winter, let's address the Pacific Northwest reality again. Port Townsend sits in the Olympic rain shadow, which means it gets less rain than Seattle or ocean shores, averaging about 20 inches per year. That sounds great until you realize less rain doesn't mean more sun. Gray skies dominate fall through spring. According to NOAA climate data, Port Townsend averages 132 sunny days per year compared to the national average of 205. If you need sunlight for your mental health, this is not your town. But here's what Port Townsend offers that most beach towns don't. Culture. The town has a wooden boat festival that draws builders and enthusiasts from around the world. There's a thriving arts scene with galleries, theaters, and film festivals. Cafes and restaurants are legitimately good, not just good for a small town, but actually good. The food co-op is the kind of place where you can buy local oysters and also attend a talk on permaculture. The waterfront is working maritime mixed with tourism. You'll see commercial fishing boats, sailboat repair yards, and kayak rental shops all occupying the same docks. Fort Worden State Park sits just outside town, offering miles of beaches, hiking trails, and historic military bunkers to explore. The water is Puget Sound, so it's cold but calmer than the open Pacific, and you'll share it with seals, otters, and occasional orcas. Picture this: Saturday morning at the farmer's market, which takes over downtown streets in summer. You're drinking coffee from a local roaster, watching wooden boats glide across the bay, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery mixing with sea air. Musicians play on street corners. Your neighbors are a retired engineer, a boat builder, and a novelist you've never heard of, but who's apparently important. Your mortgage is less than a Seattle parking space, and you haven't heard a car alarm in years. Employment is a mixed bag. The maritime industry provides some jobs. Tourism and hospitality provide more. But realistically, if you're moving to Port Townsend, you're either retired, working remotely, or creating your own income somehow. The median household income is $58,400 according to Census Bureau data, which is notably lower than the state median of $78,700. People aren't getting rich here. They're choosing lifestyle over income. The community is quirky in ways that are either charming or insufferable, depending on your tolerance for small town alternative culture. There are drum circles, there are community theater productions, there are very strong opinions about local politics and zoning. One local described it as a small town where half the people moved here to escape conformity and now conform to non-conformity. At least Port Townsend has culture and wooden boat festivals to justify the rain. Our next beach town has 7 miles of sand, 80 inches of rain, and almost nothing else. The austerity is the point. But 4. Rockaway Beach, Oregon, the Manzanita alternative, down the Oregon coast to Rockaway Beach, where 7 miles of shoreline stretch out with the kind of natural beauty that makes you forget civilization exists, which is convenient because civilization mostly doesn't. Rockaway Beach sits between Cannon Beach to the north and Tillamook to the south, which means most tourists blow right past it heading to the famous Haystack Rock or the Cheese Factory. Population hovers around 1,300 year-round, swelling slightly in summer but never reaching the crowding of more famous Oregon coast towns. This is not a secret in Oregon. Oregonians know about it, they just don't tell anyone else. Here's the economic snapshot. Zillow data shows median home prices at $448,000 as of late 2024, which is cheaper than Cannon Beach, but not exactly cheap in absolute terms. Homes sit on the market for an average of 89 days according to Redfin, which tells you this is a considered purchase, not an impulse decision. The cost of living index is 112, elevated by housing costs and the isolation premium you pay for goods and services. The town itself is essentially one main road parallel to the beach with a handful of side streets. There's a small grocery store, a few restaurants that close for winter or operate on abbreviated schedules, and the kind of antique shops that make you wonder who's buying this stuff. The nearest real shopping is Tillamook, 15 miles south, where the cheese factory and a Safeway represent the peak of retail excitement. Let's talk weather, because on the Oregon coast, weather isn't background, it's the main character. Rockaway Beach gets approximately 80 inches of rain per year, according to NOAA data. Winter storms bring wind that can knock you sideways, rain that comes in horizontal, and waves that pound the beach with enough force to reshape the shoreline. Power outages are common. Your internet will go out, your plans will get canceled because a tree fell across Highway 101. But here's the thing, people move here for the storms. Winter storm watching is a legitimate activity. You sit in a coffee shop or your own living room and watch the Pacific Ocean lose its mind. The drama is real and humbling. Summer, when it arrives for approximately 10 weeks, is spectacular. The beach is wide, the sand is firm enough to bike on, and the water is cold enough that only locals and crazy people swim without wetsuits. The community is a mix of retirees, remote workers, and people who work in Tillamook or Portland and chose a commute over compromise. The median age is 55, which means this is not a young party town. This is a quiet town where people came to decompress. According to Census Bureau data, the median household income is $52,100, below both state and national averages. People aren't here to get wealthy, they're here because they decided wealth and beach access are different things. Employment options are limited, tourism and hospitality provide seasonal work. Some residents commute to Portland, which is 90 miles and 90 minutes in good traffic, longer when it's raining hard or the coast range gets icy. Remote work is essential for most newcomers, and internet infrastructure has improved with recent fiber installations, but you'll want backup plans for when storms take out connectivity. The beach itself is the entire point. 7 miles of shoreline that's accessible, walkable, and almost never crowded. Tide pools at low tide reveal starfish, anemones, and crabs. Agates wash up after storms, turning beachcombing into treasure hunting. Bald eagles are common. Gray whales migrate past twice a year. If you need nature to be curated and convenient, this isn't for you. If you want nature to be overwhelming and indifferent, this is perfect. One resident told us, Rockaway Beach is for people who are tired of fighting for parking, fighting for space, fighting for quiet. You trade convenience for peace. Some days I drive 30 minutes for groceries and I'm fine with that. Picture this, winter afternoon, storm rolling in dark across the Pacific, waves hitting 15 feet, wind howling, rain pelting the windows. You're inside with a book and coffee, watching the ocean rage, knowing you have nowhere to be and nothing to prove. Your mortgage is less than a Seattle studio apartment, and the last traffic jam you experienced was waiting for an elk to cross the road. From Oregon, where the rain is relentless, to Florida, where hurricanes are scheduled appointments. At least the Panhandle has oysters. Well, it used to. That's the whole story, actually. Number 3. Apalachicola, Florida, the Forgotten Panhandle. From the Oregon coast to Florida's Forgotten Panhandle, where Apalachicola sits on the Gulf like a fishing village that someone accidentally turned into a tourist destination, and then the tourists forgot to show up consistently. Apalachicola, or Appalach to locals, is a 2.2 square mile town on the Gulf Coast with a population of about 2,200 people. It's famous for oysters. Apalachicola Bay produces 90% of Florida's oysters, or it used to before a combination of overharvesting, pollution, and freshwater management decisions from upstream dams crashed the population. The oyster industry is recovering slowly, but the town's identity as the oyster capital is now more historical than current. Here's the real estate situation. Zillow shows median home prices at $310,000 as of late 2024, which is shockingly affordable for Florida waterfront property. Compare that to anything in the Keys or the Tampa Bay area, and Apalachicola looks like a pricing error. Homes sit on market for an average of 103 days, according to Redfin, which indicates a slow-moving market where sellers need patience and buyers have leverage. The cost of living index is 98, just below national average, which is almost unheard of for coastal Florida. But there are reasons for that affordability, and we need to talk about them honestly. First, hurricanes. Apalachicola sits directly in the path of Gulf storms, and the town has been hit repeatedly. Hurricane Michael in 2018 devastated the area, causing $25 billion in damage across the panhandle. According to NOAA's National Hurricane Center, Apalachicola sits in a high-risk zone with major hurricane strikes averaging every 10 to 15 years. Flood insurance is mandatory and expensive. Wind insurance is a separate policy and also expensive. Your insurance costs will rival your mortgage payment. Second, isolation. Apalachicola is 2 hours from Tallahassee, 3 hours from Pensacola, and feels psychologically isolated from the rest of Florida. The nearest hospital with a full emergency room is in Tallahassee. Specialty medical care means long drives. Shopping beyond basics means driving to Panama City, an hour east. According to the Florida Department of Health, Franklin County, where Apalachicola is located, has a primary care physician shortage with a ratio of 1 doctor per 3,400 residents. Third, the economy is fragile. The oyster industry collapse hit hard. Tourism helps, but it's inconsistent and seasonal. The median household income is $38,200 according to census data, well below state and national averages. The poverty rate is 24%, nearly double the national average. This is a working class town where people are getting by, not getting ahead. If Rockaway Beach felt isolated with its 7 miles of beach and limited amenities, at least it wasn't recovering from an ecological collapse. Apalachicola is rebuilding an entire identity while price-like people have already given up. The math is brutal and beautiful, but here's what Apalachicola has that most Florida beach towns sold off decades ago: authenticity. The downtown is a grid of historic buildings, many from the 1800s, housing galleries, seafood restaurants, and shops that aren't chains. The waterfront is working docks and fishing boats, not yacht clubs and condos. You can still buy fresh seafood directly from boats at the dock. The pace is slow, the people are friendly, and the culture is old Florida before Disney turned the state into a theme park. The community has a thriving arts scene that feels outsized for a town this small. There's an annual film festival, art galleries, and writers who've moved here for the quiet and the cheap rent. The Apalachicola River meets the Gulf here, creating an estuary ecosystem that's ecologically rich and beautiful if you're into that sort of thing. Weather is Gulf Coast standard, hot and humid in summer, mild in winter. Hurricane season from June through November keeps you alert. According to NOAA climate data, Apalachicola averages 215 sunny days per year and 59 inches of rain. Summer means afternoon thunderstorms that roll in like clockwork. Winter means occasional cold snaps where temperatures drop into the 30s and Floridians act like the apocalypse arrived. One local artist who moved here from Atlanta told us, "Apalachicola is for people who want the beach life without the beach scene. It's not fancy, it's real. Some days that means struggling oyster fishermen. Other days it means watching dolphins from your porch while drinking sweet tea. Both are true." Picture this: early evening, sitting on the riverfront watching shrimp boats come in, pelicans diving, the smell of salt water and frying seafood from the restaurant behind you. The sun sets orange and pink over the bay. You're wearing shorts in February. Your mortgage is less than what your friends in Miami pay for a 1-bedroom, and you haven't been stuck in traffic since you moved here. Apalachicola is 2 hours from civilization. Our next stop makes that sound cosmopolitan. We're heading to the literal edge of America, where the sun arrives first and everything else arrives last. Number 2. Lubeck, Maine, the easternmost point to the edge of America, where Lubeck, Maine sits at the northeastern tip of the United States, like a lighthouse nobody remembered to turn off. Lubeck is the easternmost town in the continental United States. The sun hits here first. The population is about 1,300 and dropping, down from 1,600 a decade ago. This is not a growing town. This is a town that exists because some people refuse to leave, and a few strange souls keep showing up because they want to live at the literal end of the map. The real estate numbers tell a story of extreme affordability and extreme caution. Zillow data shows median home prices at $168,000 as of late 2024. That's not a typo. You can buy a house in Lubeck for less than a used pickup truck costs in some markets. Redfin shows homes sitting on the market for an average of 147 days, which tells you this is not a hot market. This is a think very carefully before you do this market. The cost of living index is 94, below national average, but that number is misleading because everything in Lubeck costs more than it should due to transportation premiums. Groceries cost more because they have to be trucked in. Gas costs more because there's limited competition. Heating oil, which most homes rely on, costs more because you're at the end of the delivery route. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Maine has the highest residential heating costs in the nation, and Lubeck is at the expensive end of that scale. Let's talk about what you're actually getting into. Lubeck is remote in a way that Americans who haven't lived in rural Maine can't quite grasp. The nearest city of any size is Bangor, 3 hours away. The nearest hospital is in Machias, 28 miles south. The nearest airport with commercial service is Bangor. If you have a medical emergency, you're looking at a long ambulance ride or a helicopter. According to Maine's Office of Rural Health, Washington County, where Lubeck is located, has the worst healthcare access in the state. Employment options are fishing, tourism, and not much else. The median household income is $31,900 according to census data, which is poverty level by national standards. The unemployment rate fluctuates seasonally, but stays higher than state and national averages. If you're moving to Lubeck, you're either retired, working remotely, or creating your own income through some combination of gigs and determination. Picture this: July morning, fog lifting off the bay, the smell of salt and pine, absolute silence except for waves hitting rocks and gulls crying overhead. You're watching the sunrise before anyone else in America sees it. Your mortgage is less than a car payment. Your nearest neighbor is a quarter mile away. You haven't been to a shopping mall in 6 months, and you don't miss it even a little. The weather is brutal and beautiful. Winters are long, cold, and dark. According to NOAA data, Lubeck averages 195 days per year below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow is common from November through April. Nor'easters bring blizzard conditions, power outages, and days where you're not leaving the house. The ocean moderates temperatures slightly, but wind chills can drop into the negatives. Summer, when it arrives, is spectacular, but short. July and August bring highs in the 70s, fog that rolls in thick and dramatic, and days that feel like the reward for surviving 9 months of winter. The coastline is rocky and wild, with tide pools, cliffs, and views across to Canada. You can see Campobello Island from downtown Lubeck, close enough to swim to if you had a death wish and a good wetsuit. The community is small, aging, and wary of outsiders in that classic New England way. People are friendly once they decide you're serious about staying, but until then, you're from away, and that label sticks. According to census data, the median age is 57, which tells you this is a town of retirees and older working people. Young families are rare, schools are small, the social scene is limited, but here's what Lubeck has: space, silence, and a wildness that feels increasingly rare. The tourism season brings some bustle in summer when visitors come to see West Quoddy Head Light, the candy-striped lighthouse that marks the easternmost point. But most of the year, you have this place to yourself. You can walk the cliffs, watch eagles, see seals and porpoises in the water, and go days without seeing another person. A local who moved here from Boston 10 years ago told us, "Lubeck is for people who are done with people. If you need restaurants, culture, convenience, anything at all, really, this is not your place. But if you want to live at the edge of America and feel the weight of the world lift off your shoulders, Lubeck is perfect." Lubeck is extreme isolation for extreme people. But if that feels like too much commitment, our number one pick is a beach town that somehow manages to balance everything Lubeck can't. Pop culture fame with genuine affordability, working class grit with stunning beauty, and a location so iconic that movies keep coming back while regular people can still afford to live there. Number 1. Astoria, Oregon, the Goonies town, to the mouth of the Columbia River, where Astoria sits on the Oregon coast like a Victorian seaport that Hollywood discovered, filmed in, and then left mostly alone. Astoria is famous for exactly one thing to most Americans. It's where The Goonies was filmed. The 1985 movie put Astoria on the map for a generation of kids who dreamed of pirate treasure and secret caves. But here's what the movie didn't show you. Astoria is a real working port with a real history, real affordability, and a quality of life that most coastal towns abandoned decades ago. The population is around 10,000, stable but not growing dramatically. This is the oldest American settlement west of the Rockies, founded in 1811 as a fur trading post. The Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean here, creating one of the most dramatic confluences in North America. The geography alone makes Astoria worth visiting. The affordability makes it worth living in. Here's the data that matters. According to Zillow, median home prices in Astoria are $419,000 as of late 2024. For a West Coast coastal town with this much character, history, and natural beauty, that's almost absurdly cheap. Compare that to anything in California or Seattle, and Astoria looks like someone made a pricing mistake. Redfin shows homes moving at an average of 62 days on market, indicating steady demand without the feeding frenzy. The cost of living index is 111, elevated but manageable, especially compared to Portland just 90 miles south, where the index is 128. Property taxes are reasonable by Oregon standards. The cost premium you're paying is for location, not artificially inflated resort pricing. But let's be clear about what Astoria is and isn't. This is not a resort town. This is a working port. The waterfront is a mix of fish processing plants, marinas, tourist shops, and restaurants. You'll smell fish processing some days. You'll hear ship horns and harbor traffic. This is industrial maritime beauty, not sanitized vacation beauty. The town climbs hills from the river up to the residential areas, creating a topography that means some homes have jaw-dropping views and some homes have views of their neighbor's garage. Victorian homes, many from the 1880s to 1920s boom years, line the hillside streets in various states of restoration. Some have been beautifully maintained, others need work. Fixer-uppers exist here for people willing to put in sweat equity. Weather is Pacific Northwest standard, which means rain. Astoria gets about 67 inches per year according to NOAA data, which is less than some coastal Oregon towns, but still substantial. Gray skies dominate fall through spring, but the location at the Columbia River mouth creates unique weather patterns. Some days you'll have fog so thick you can't see across the street. Other days, the sun breaks through and the whole town glows. The economy is diversified in ways most small towns aren't. The port provides jobs. Tourism provides more, especially in summer when film fans, history buffs, and river cruise passengers flood the downtown. There's commercial fishing, fish processing, and related maritime industries. The Coast Guard has a significant presence. Healthcare and education provide stable employment. According to the Oregon Employment Department, the median household income in Astoria is $54,600, below state averages but higher than many rural coastal towns. The downtown is legitimately charming, with coffee shops, breweries, restaurants that range from diner classics to surprisingly upscale seafood, bookstores, galleries, and shops that aren't all tourist traps. The Sunday market in summer brings local vendors, food, and a community gathering that feels genuine. The Astoria Riverwalk follows the Columbia River for miles, offering views of the river, the bridge to Washington, ships heading out to sea, and on clear days, mountains in the distance. Culture exists here in a way that's rare for towns this size. The Liberty Theater hosts concerts and films. There are art galleries, a maritime museum that's actually worth visiting, and the Astoria column on top of Coxcomb Hill offers 360-degree views that will make you understand why people stay here despite the rain. The community is a mix of longtime locals whose families have been here for generations, retirees from Portland and California, younger remote workers, and artists attracted by the combination of beauty and affordability. One local writer told us, Astoria is what the Oregon coast would have been if development hadn't ruined it. We got lucky. The port kept us working class. The geography kept us real. Fun fact, beyond the Goonies, Astoria has been a filming location for Kindergarten Cop, Short Circuit, The Ring 2, and others. Hollywood keeps coming back because Astoria looks like a real place, because it is. Picture this, Saturday morning, walking the Riverwalk with coffee from a local roaster, watching ships navigate the Columbia River Bar where the river meets the Pacific, fishing boats heading out, the Astoria-Megler Bridge stretching 4 miles to Washington, hills behind you covered in Victorian homes. Your mortgage is less than a Portland parking space. You can walk to breweries, bookstores, and the waterfront. You're 2 hours from Portland when you need city access. And when tourists ask you about the Goonies, you smile and point them toward the house because you're used to it by now. This is the beach town that balances everything: working port and tourist destination, film history and real community, stunning natural beauty and actual affordability, Victorian architecture and industrial grit, rain and reward. And somehow, improbably, it's still a place where normal people can afford to live on the coast. From Port Aransas, where hurricanes are rent for Gulf Coast living, to Ocean Shores, where storms are entertainment, to Cape Charles, where the bay is warmer than the ocean, to Port Townsend, where Victorian charm costs Victorian maintenance, to Rockaway Beach, where 7 miles of sand come with 80 inches of rain, to Apalachicola, where oysters made the town and their collapse almost broke it, to Lubeck, where you're first to see sunrise and last to get Amazon deliveries, to Astoria, where the Goonies filmed and real people still live. 8 beach towns, 8 different coasts, climates, and compromises. Average median home price, $387,000. That's less than a 1-bedroom condo in most major coastal cities. Less than a parking space in Boston. For that, you get ocean or bay access, real communities, and the kind of coastal living that most Americans assume disappeared decades ago. These aren't the beach towns in magazines. They're the ones locals know, weekenders discover, and smart buyers target before everyone else figures it out. Some will grow, some will stay small. All of them offer something increasingly rare: affordable access to the coast. If this video helped you discover a beach town you'd never heard of, hit that like button. If you want more hidden gems, affordable alternatives, and places the real estate industrial complex doesn't want you to know about, subscribe. And drop a comment telling me which of these 8 you'd choose, or if there's a beach town I missed that deserves to be on this list. The coast is still accessible. You just have to know where to look.